They told you that emotional warmth is the ultimate proof of genuine love. That is a dangerous, systemic lie. The truth is far more brutal. The people who constantly perform empathy, the ones who loudly broadcast their compassion and cry the hardest at your pain, are almost always the first ones to abandon you when things get truly dark. You have been trained to trust the smiling face, blinding yourself to the profound narcissism hiding just beneath their comforting words. Think about the cyclical nature of this betrayal. How many times have you confided your deepest, most bleeding trauma to a deeply caring friend, only to have that exact vulnerability weaponized against you months later? If you do not learn to see through the mask of performative empathy right now, tomorrow you will make the exact same mistake. You will hand your heart to another smiling predator, and they will consume it to feed their own ego while convincing you they are the victim. We must break this cycle using the uncompromising framework of Carl Jung. I'm going to show you how to use his concept of the integrated shadow to shatter the illusion of the modern empath. We will uncover a terrifying paradox that society desperately wants to hide from you. Why the cold, guarded, fiercely detached people you were explicitly told to avoid are actually the only ones psychologically capable of offering you profound, unconditional loyalty. It is 2 a.m, and the fluorescent lights of a crowded hospital waiting room buzz overhead. Your entire world is collapsing. You check your phone, and the friends who constantly post about being empaths are safely tucked in bed, sending you praying hands emojis. Meanwhile, the person society warned you was too cold and too guarded is sitting right next to you in the sterile waiting area, silently and methodically sorting through your insurance paperwork. You feel a lump in your throat as the realization hits you. Their comforting warmth was nothing but an illusion. In Jungian psychology, excessive emotional warmth and performative empathy are almost always functions of the persona. This is the artificial social mask constructed by the psyche, designed solely to extract validation from the collective herd. These people are not actually connecting with your tragedy. They are merely performing a socially acceptable script to ensure their survival. This performance is governed by a ruthless psychological mechanism known as the law of compensation. Jung dictates that an overly bright, fiercely accommodating persona always conceals a massive, highly toxic shadow. When they shower you with theatrical pity, it is not actually about your pain. It is a desperate, unconscious mechanism to feed their own fragile self-image as a fundamentally good person. They are using your tragedy as a mirror to admire their own fake halo. When a real crisis strikes, when the situation demands actual, gritty sacrifice rather than just a sympathetic text message, their carefully crafted persona instantly fractures. They suddenly vanish, claiming they are protecting their own mental health. But the clinical truth is that they abandon you because staying would require them to face the raw, dark reality of actual human suffering. Their unintegrated, fragile ego simply cannot process the terrifying depth of genuine tragedy. They flee back to the safety of their pastel-colored social media feeds, leaving you completely alone in the wreckage. They are terrified of the dark, both in the world and within themselves. Meanwhile, the guarded individual sitting next to you in the hospital remains perfectly steady. Because they do not rely on a fake, empathetic persona to validate their existence, they have the psychological density required to absorb the shockwave of reality without crumbling into pieces. You are finally seeing the stark difference between emotional performance and psychological grit. The mask has slipped, and the betrayal is agonizingly clear. But this realization forces us to confront a deeply unsettling mystery about human nature. Why does the person who loudly claims to feel your pain the most always disappear the exact moment you actually need them to bleed? To answer this, we must dissect the very anatomy of the lie they tell themselves. To truly understand the anatomy of this lie, we must observe how the collective herd violently punishes anyone who refuses to wear the mask. The scene is a cramped dining room during a highly tense Thanksgiving dinner. Harper sits at the table, listening to her aunt deliver a tearful, dramatic toast about how family must always stick together. Yet, this is the exact same aunt who secretly spreads vicious rumors about Harper's career the moment she leaves the room.
Harper does not perform. She does not nod, she does not weep, and she firmly refuses to smile at the theatrical display. She simply sits in stoic, heavy silence. Instantly, the temperature in the room drops. The entire family collectively glares at her, silently labeling her as the cold, broken one who is ruining the holiday. This brings us to a twisted psychological paradox. Why is the person who refuses to play the fake emotional game always the one accused of destroying the peace?
Society actively pathologizes emotional detachment because it is deeply terrified of the integrated mind. When you refuse to validate a manipulator's performance, they will inevitably brand you as heartless or sociopathic. But Harper's absolute coldness at that dinner table is not a lack of feeling or a trauma response. It is a highly calibrated, impenetrable boundary against emotional vampirism. She's protecting her psychological sovereignty from a room full of emotional parasites. The glaring family members are engaging in a massive collective delusion. In the strict language of Jungian psychoanalysis, the tearful aunt is violently projecting her own unintegrated shadow onto Harper. By collectively labeling Harper as the cold and unfeeling villain of the family, these highly toxic individuals unconsciously absolve themselves of their own hidden malice. They desperately need a convenient scapegoat to carry the profound guilt of their own two-faced behavior. This is the ultimate defensive mechanism of the fake empath. When you do not react to their theatrical warmth, you instantly deprive them of their mirror. You force them to sit in the deafening silence of their own hypocrisy. To avoid the agonizing pain of looking at their own shadow, they must immediately attack yours. They point their fingers at your stoic silence and scream that you are the monster, simply because your quiet dignity entirely exposes the cheapness of their disguise. These performative empaths operate under a severe state of what Carl Jung termed archetypal possession. Specifically, they are entirely possessed by the savior archetype. To sustain this grand illusion of moral superiority, they absolutely require you to be weak, emotionally messy, and deeply dependent on their comforting words. They need a broken victim so they can play the righteous hero. When you remain guarded and self-reliant, you shatter their entire psychological framework. Harper's cold, unshakable self-reliance aggressively starves her aunt's fragile ego of its required narcissistic supply. By refusing to break down or accept the fake sympathy, Harper denies the manipulator their chemical hit of dominance. The family is not angry because Harper is being cruel. They are furious because she has cut off their food source. They are experiencing the frantic psychological withdrawal that occurs when a predator suddenly loses all control over its intended prey. But while Harper's coldness serves as a flawless defensive wall against a toxic family, we must explore how this exact same psychological armor functions in a real, life-or-death crisis. What happens when genuine disaster strikes, and the performative empaths inevitably flee. We must shift our focus to see how the integrated shadow operates proactively, acting as an unshakable anchor when someone you truly love is actually drowning in terror. When the polite illusions of the Thanksgiving table are replaced by the brutal reality of a genuine crisis, the mechanics of empathy change completely. Step into Ethan's apartment late at night. The air is thick with genuine terror. His partner is spiraling into a severe panic attack, sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, her nervous system entirely hijacked. The friends who text her heart emojis during the day are nowhere to be found. Ethan is right there, but his reaction defies every modern expectation of how a supportive partner should act. He does not coddle her. He does not drop to the floor to cry with her. And he absolutely refuses to validate the catastrophic thoughts racing through her mind. He simply sits nearby, breathing slowly, offering a cold, heavy, unbreakable presence. To an outside observer, he might look heartless. But what if drowning in someone else's sorrow is not an act of love, but an act of supreme psychological cowardice? For decades, we have been sold a dangerous lie about the nature of empathy. Pop psychology worships affective empathy, the immediate, visceral reaction of crying when someone else cries. But in a moment of true crisis, affective empathy is often just a catastrophic failure of psychological boundaries. It is emotional contagion, a primitive mirroring response that pulls you into the chaos. It is not love. It is the inability to maintain your own psychological structure under pressure. Ethan operates on a completely different frequency. He relies on cognitive empathy, driven by a consciously integrated shadow. He understands the exact architecture of her terror perfectly. He can map the contours of her panic without a single word spoken. But he absolutely refuses to absorb it. He knows that if he allows her panic to infect his own nervous system, he ceases to be an anchor and becomes just another drowning victim. This level of stoic detachment is not a natural default. It requires immense, cultivated psychological strength. It is the conscious, agonizing refusal to indulge in the emotional drama of the moment. Ethan denies himself the cheap, immediate validation of playing the emotional rescuer. He chooses to look cold and unfeeling in order to secure the actual, physical survival of the person he loves, waiting patiently until her nervous system finally regulates against his unshakable calm. If you have ever been the steady bedrock in a crisis, if you have ever been labeled cold or distant simply because you were trying to stay strong while everyone else fell apart, hit the like button right now. Let us know this psychological truth resonates with your reality. Subscribe to the channel to join a community that values grit over performative warmth. And leave a comment sharing a moment when your silent strength was completely misunderstood by the herd. This profound capacity to remain steady while another person shatters is the hidden superpower of the integrated mind. It proves that the detachment society fears is actually the strongest foundation for genuine connection. But this kind of love, forged in the shadow rather than performed in the light, demands a heavy toll. We must now examine the ultimate paradox of the dark empath. Why their purest acts of devotion often require the absolute destruction of their own reputation. This silent strength, the refusal to participate in the performance of grief, isolates you. It demands a heavy, terrifying toll, the deliberate destruction of your own social standing. To understand this ultimate paradox, we must look at Harper again, but not at the dinner table. It is past midnight. The house is completely dark. Harper is quietly logging into her banking app on her phone, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light. She is anonymously paying the next installment for her troubled sister's rehab facility. She will never tell her sister that she is the benefactor, and she will certainly never tell her judgmental aunt. She fully accepts being the cold, unfeeling villain at the Thanksgiving table, while secretly holding the entire fabric of their shattered lives together. Why does the purest, most genuine form of love require the absolute destruction of your own reputation? The answer lies in the terrifying reality of true individuation. Carl Jung taught that the journey to psychological wholeness absolutely demands that you sacrifice the desperate need to be understood and validated by the herd. Harper accepts the family's projection of villain because she knows the clinical truth. If she corrected them, if she revealed her secret sacrifice, she would no longer be acting out of love. She would be feeding her own ego. Jung wrote extensively about the concept of secret alchemy. He understood that any act of love or charity performed in the light, where the herd can see and applaud it, is inherently corrupted by the subconscious desire for validation. When the performative empath helps you, they are purchasing a ticket to feel morally superior. Love that occurs entirely in the shadow, in absolute secrecy, is the only love that is pure, because it expects zero return on investment. Harper's action is not a tragedy. It is the pinnacle of psychological mastery. This is the profound paradox of the dark empath. Society assumes that because they are guarded, they are entirely selfish. But the clinical reality is the exact opposite. Because they have fully integrated their own capacity for selfishness, because they have explored their own shadow, they are the only ones psychologically capable of a truly selfless act. They do not need you to worship them. They do not need you to validate their goodness. They will let you hate them, resent them, and misunderstand them, as long as it ensures your survival. This is a terrifying form of devotion that the performative empath can never comprehend, because it requires the death of the very persona they worship. The true sovereign operates in the dark, entirely free from the applause of the crowd. When you finally grasp this, the accusations of being cold no longer sting. They become a badge of honor, proof that you have successfully detached your self-worth from the opinions of emotional vampires. But if this coldness requires such profound isolation, how does the dark empath ever build a genuine connection? We must now return to Ethan to see how this exact same detachment functions when the crisis is over and the dust finally settles. The dust has settled in Ethan's apartment. It is the morning after the panic attack, and the air is clear. He and his partner are walking through the waking city, the harsh daylight replacing the terror of the night before. She looks at him, and the residual tension finally dissolves into a profound, quiet respect. She suddenly understands the magnitude of what happened. She did not need him to mirror her chaos. She needed the cold, unshakable anchor he provided. This quiet realization forces us to confront the most destructive myth ever sold by modern culture. I want you to look at the lie we are constantly fed. We are told that the ultimate goal of romance is to find your other half, to completely dissolve your boundaries until two souls become one. But why is this romantic ideal of complete emotional merging actually a recipe for total psychological destruction? Because what society calls true love is often just mutual consumption. In the strict language of Jungian psychoanalysis, when you frantically try to merge with another person, you are not actually connecting with them. You are merely projecting your own unconscious ideal, your anima or animus, directly onto their face. You are demanding that they play the role of your missing half. You are not falling in love with a human being. You are falling in love with your own psychological reflection, completely blinding yourself to the real person standing in front of you.
This is why these deeply enmeshed, highly emotional relationships always end in catastrophic bitterness. The moment the other person inevitably deviates from the perfect script you projected onto them, the entire fantasy collapses. The intense warmth you initially felt turns into toxic resentment. You feel betrayed, not because they actually wronged you, but because they dared to step out of the flawless, fictional character you forced them to play to manage your own anxiety. This is exactly where the strategic coldness of the integrated mind becomes an act of profound love. Ethan's strict psychological boundaries aggressively prevent this toxic projection from taking root. He refuses to be absorbed into her emotional world, and he absolutely refuses to let her dissolve into his. By maintaining this unshakable distance, he actively forces his partner to exist as a completely separate, sovereign individual. He does not offer her a comforting fantasy, nor does he demand one in return. Ethan does not love a sanitized, idealized version of the woman walking next to him. He loves the gritty, flawed, and chaotic reality of who she actually is. He sees her shadow, her panic, and her imperfections, and he chooses to stay without trying to fix or change her. This is a terrifying level of honesty that the performative empath is entirely incapable of sustaining. This absolute refusal to merge creates the ultimate psychological safety. You can never truly be betrayed by an integrated mind because they never promised you an illusion in the first place. Their devotion is not contingent on you playing a part. When the foundation of a relationship is built on concrete reality rather than shared delusions, it cannot be shattered by the friction of daily life. The coldness society pathologizes is actually the bedrock of unbreakable trust. The integrated individual does not need you to complete them, which means they are the only ones who can simply appreciate you exactly as you are. Their loyalty is forged in reality, not in the desperate, clinging fantasy of codependency. They will not flatter you, they will not save you, and they will absolutely not let you hide from your own potential. Their love is a cold, unwavering mirror that forces you to step up and become the author of your own life. Accepting this kind of fierce, unvarnished devotion requires you to completely abandon the fairy tales you were fed as a child. It demands that you wake up and finally face the world without the suffocating, comforting blanket of emotional illusions. The integrated path is solitary, but it is the only path that leads to genuine connection. We are now ready to make the final transition, to take this hardened shield and step fully into the sovereignty of your own life. Ethan and Harper's journeys are just blueprints for the exact transition you are standing on the edge of right now. Step up to the glass of your own life and look out at the sprawling, chaotic city below. The frantic noise of the street is muffled by the thick pane of glass, and for the first time, the isolation does not feel like loneliness. It feels like a terrifying, beautiful sovereignty. You are finally realizing that you no longer have to perform for anyone down there. For years, you have been told that the emotional distance you maintain is a tragic flaw. Therapists and performative empaths tried to convince you that the ice around your heart was a trauma response waiting to be cured. But what if they were entirely wrong? What if that coldness is not a symptom of a broken mind, but the final hardened shield of your individuation? You are not sick for refusing to absorb the hysteria of the herd. You are simply awake. The world will constantly demand that you bleed for its entertainment. It will demand that you smile on cue, that you perform your empathy loudly, and that you set yourself on fire just to keep the collective warm. You must ruthlessly refuse them. Your psychological architecture is not fundamentally broken just because it lacks the fragile, porous boundaries they exploit. By integrating your shadow, you have built an unbreakable fortress that terrifies the weak. A person gains absolute psychological power only in the exact moment they realize the truth. The coldness that society so aggressively hates is actually the precise boundary keeping their soul intact. You must stop apologizing for not playing their exhausting emotional games. The manipulators will call you heartless, but the rare few who truly matter will recognize the heavy, silent weight of your loyalty. They will see the pure devotion hiding behind your composure. I want you to physically anchor this realization and permanently break the chains of their guilt. Go into the comments right now and declare this manifestation. My boundaries are not an insult. My coldness is my loyalty. Type it as a binding contract with your own integrated mind. And if you are ready to stop being prey and continue this ascent into psychological sovereignty, subscribe to the channel. Join a circle of minds who refuse to be domesticated by illusions. The crowd will always choose a comforting lie over a difficult truth. Let them have their illusions. You have done the grueling alchemy of facing your darkness, securing a clarity they can never touch. Walk into the world not as a fragile empath waiting to be consumed, but as a sovereign force anchored in reality. Keep your shield raised, trust the silence of your mind, and never surrender your boundaries. Until next time.